So next we're going to go on to clients. So to look at our clients, this is again a list. So type in here the client you want to find if you've added one already. So let's just go ahead and find Aldi. So this is the client record. So these are the contacts we've added to the client. So we've got Carl in here. If we need to add a new contact, fill in the details. You can define which category they belong to. So if you've got within the same client different categories, so driving and industrial, for example, then of course each one will appear as a list specifically when you're doing bookings, which again saves time when you're dealing with lots of contacts potentially. Follow-up calls we've covered. Next is going on to other parts of the client record setup. So within this client, I've got business units within HQ at the top. So HQ isn't where I normally trade with this client. It's the actual stores, which are the sites. So these are the locations where we can trade with. So to add a business unit, just click in the details here, add new business unit, fill it in, select HQ as your parent and fill in the rest of the information. So this is obviously where the site location or department, however the breakdown is for that reason for the business unit. The invoice address at this point you can choose to be the same, so whatever it is up here. So if indeed the invoice has to be quoted as being the actual individual site, or it could be an HQ, so it's going to the HQ address, or another address which you can type down here. You'll also notice the invoice email address at the bottom for you to add indeed for where the invoice actually goes to when engaging with this business unit. So once you've added your business units, so you structure your client in this case for me is HQ with the sites. So next we're going to go on to days and rates, and I've already added with this client 3 different rate labels: days, nights and weekends. We can add more like so by clicking add rate label. So once we've added our rate labels, you go to your split rate templates and you can define your split rate templates. So this can be a little bit more involved when dealing with different rates that apply on different days for different time ranges. So really useful if you're dealing with shift work where rates change after a certain time. If they don't, if they're pretty standard and maybe overtime appears after so many hours, then of course you can make your split rate templates fairly straightforward, as I've done here. So the only changes I've got, automatic changes, is that obviously when it knows it's Saturday or Sunday, this is equal to a weekend date. Nights is nights. So when you were to add your rates, you would obviously select the days you want, the time range you want, so 6 till 2, whatever it might be, and then you select your rate label. It's as simple as that under that particular split rate, and this will be used against bookings, so the system would then know what rate to apply for what time of day for what day of the week, which is really handy. You'll also notice I didn't mention it in the business units. You've got obviously the bank holiday option here as well, because in the system you can set up all your bank holidays, and again it would know when a bank holiday occurs because you've already predefined your calendar, which means that if you do pay different money on bank holidays, this would automatically trigger a different rate, again without you having to worry about it because you're automating these processes in the system. So then we come on to what's called labour grades. Labour grades are effectively the jobs for these for your client. So I've got a couple of jobs here: operative days, operative nights. So add new labour grade, we'll simply add your new job and again select the category. Here is if you want to operate 2 different rate cards, one with post AWR and obviously one with pre AWR. Well, obviously the post AWR rate card will only trigger after 12 weeks when candidates work there. So in this case I haven't triggered AWR in this instance, so I only have 1 rate card, but I can show you one where I've got 2 in a minute. So if we look at Northampton store, this particular rate card I've put for days, so this obviously job is for days that I've selected, so I've only got the day rate applied, which is £9, £2 margin with all my costs automatically worked out for me, so therefore the charge rate is set at 13.21. We can switch these options off system-wide or client-specific, up to you. So I think it's useful because if the pay rate does change, I don't want my margin to reduce simply because I've quoted an amount here. So I want to make sure I'm quoting the right money as and when the pay rate changes, but my margin doesn't. It either stays the same or increases. And again, we've got the weekend one here because, of course, on the split rate, I might use weekend rates. But at the top, you'll notice the overtime settings set per week. So this will apply after 40 hours, and it will switch from £9 an hour to the overtime rate of £11.20, which is what I've typed in here. And with a £2 margin for the overtime margin here, it will equal £14.93 from, of course, £13.21. Go back. If we look at Kettering here, we've got an overtime trigger per shift. So it's added a second column to the right of the pay rate. So you've got the sort of pre-overtime rate here and then the post-overtime rate. And again, the margins here for pre and post overtime. And of course, the charge rates corresponding. If you were to set the overtime to none, then of course, you won't have any overtime automatically triggering, and it will just be purely set to whatever the rate is and the split rate used. If I set the bank holiday to be charged as, I don't have a bank holiday rate label set against Audi, then of course, you know, I could choose another one if I wanted to and click save. So then the system would automatically apply that rate. But if I had one called bank holiday, then I would need to make sure that I've added the amount in here to correspond to that when it uses it. Okay, so quite a bit done so far. Obviously, the next stage, which is another big stage to do with bookings, which I have covered in a video exclusively on bookings. So we're going to move down within the client record onto timesheets. Now within timesheets, you can actually choose the view of your timesheet list in order to remove columns that you don't necessarily need. So I'm just going to remove a few of these before I click save and apply. So within my list of timesheets for this particular client, I'm looking at a specific weekend date. I can go back to earlier periods and see these timesheets here. You can see also which business unit that each timesheet was associated to and how many hours each person worked. You have an option to find, so if I wanted to find a particular candidate, then you can search by the find option here, and by typing in the find box and clicking view, it's filtered purely on that particular candidate's name there. Then we come on to invoices, so this is listing all the invoices for my client by invoice number and of course the date. If you need a copy of the invoice, you can click the download file, which will download a copy in PDF for you, in case, for example, the client needed another copy of their invoice. Then we come on to two sections of reports. There's reports and then client reports. This section is quite a nice, easy area for you to put today's date, for example, and the name of the report, which could be agreed terms of business, or it could be rates agreed, anything like that. And then you can upload a copy of the attachment, which could be the rates that you've agreed with them and the date that it related to. So you've got a bit of a history of all of the different reports that you've got associated to Aldi in this case. The client reports, skipping portal user sec, is more specific to clients that maybe want to view these via their portal, and they could be KPI reports, so attendance reports, performance reports, that sort of thing, that you can put the date, the name, and upload the file, and then that will be visible to the client. In terms of the portal users, again, this is reference to the client portal. This is mainly at the moment to do with managing timesheets and viewing timesheets online. So what you would do is create a new portal user here, fill in the details, choose which business units they can actually do timesheets for. So they could perhaps do all of them or only some of them, depending on your selection, and whether they can actually adjust the timesheets and view them. Indeed, click save. That will then email them a link. which they then register onto the client portal area, and then they can straight away start processing and approving timesheets, which will save you a lot of time, especially compared to the old-fashioned way of managing paper-based or Excel timesheets. The other benefit is on the client portal, which we will look at later in another video, is that they can also download copies of their invoices. So this pretty much concludes the demo of the client. Thank you for watching. Please do check out PrimePRO's demos for any other videos that I produced.